We're at a very auspicious time of the year when it comes Elul, and we are approaching Yomim Noraim, days of awe. So there's an extra added touch of intensity, fear, Amos Hadin. And yet, Ani Ledodi veDodi li is the acronym that reflects the core Avodah of the month of Elul. Ani Ledodi veDodi li, we always quote that pasuk in Shir Shirim to give us a little bit of an appreciation of what the Avodas Hazman is. I'd like to maybe share a couple of ideas that will help us in our journey towards Rosh Hashanah, towards rejuvenation, towards being benched with a new year, coming into the Sukkah, Tshuva Me'ira and Tshuva Me'ahava. We live with the Parsha of the week. The Parsha always gives us insight, somehow or other, into the Avodas Hazman. And at the introduction of Elul, we read Parshas Reich. And Parshas Reich, at the very beginning, Hashem tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm placing before you bracha and klala es ha-bracha asher tishmu'u el mitzvahs Hashem Elokeichem asher anochi mitzaveh eschem hayom. We all yearn for bracha. Hashem's divine flow should come to us. We should be animated with life, connected, and all we need to do, it seems in the Torah, pretty easy, is asher tishmu. We should listen. Sounds elementary. We're already okay. But we understand that listening is not such a simple exercise. When someone is talking to us, we might be in the mode of listening, but we are thinking about what is buzzing on our phone, what's coming up on our WhatsApp. We are thinking about where we're going after they're speaking. We're actually in our mind. The mind is germinating with all kinds of responses to what they're saying, whether we agree or we don't agree. And we're not really listening. To listen in totality requires divesting self of self. In order for me to hear the other person, I have to strip myself of myself so that I can actually absorb and scope their mind. There is no other way. And what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asking from us, Shomoya Tishmu, Eikev Tishmu, and to listen down to the bottom of our boots. If we're able to absorb the Dvar Hashem down to the very fiber of our being, the innermost fiber, then we are secure and assured of bracha. And this is a message we find constantly a recurring theme in Parshas Re'eh. The beginning of the Parsha tells us that when you come into the land of Israel, you're going to see their mekoimos, their places where they worship. Abed Abdon Eskola mekoimos asher avdu sham hagoyim. You got to destroy them. They build them there. Al hehorim haromim, on the high mountains. Like voice on promontories, tachas kolates ranon, underneath very beautiful trees. But you have to destroy those places. And the Kliyaka and other commentaries point out what is the significance of the Torah telling us that you have to destroy their places. We know that Avodah Zarah, tzarach l'sharish achareh. Why is the Torah telling us that these are the places where they build their Avodah Zarah? But the Torah is giving us a deeper insight. Abed to Abdon, lo yisasum kein l'Hashem Elokeichem. Don't do that, l'Hashem Elokeichem. Because we understand our service of Hashem is entirely different, fundamentally different than the nations of the world. They build great edifices, beautiful houses of worship on prominent places because subtly, subconsciously, the place of worship is an extension of their ego. I'm rooting for my team. I want to be able to see my team victorious. I want to be able to have whether it's a church or whether it's another house of worship, it's on the gvois, it's on the important places, so that on the top of the mountain, I have to surrender. As I'm going up, I'm feeling the awe and the majesty, and I'm feeling, wow, I'm so proud to be associated with this. Your service of Hashem is different. And the Torah tells us 4 times afterwards, you're enjoined to go El HaMokoim Asher Yivcha Hashem. We're sublimating ourselves to go El HaMokoim Asher Yivcha Hashem. If it looks good or it doesn't look good, it's prominent, it's not prominent. It happens to be that the Mokum HaMikdash has very deep significance to us. The place of Adam HaRishon, the Even HaShia, the Akedah, the Har HaMoriah. But it's fundamentally, we're going there because, and we're serving Hashem there because it's Al HaMokum Asher Yivcha Hashem. And we're coming there, B'chol Avas Nafshay, V'sheris, we're serving Hashem because the essence of our service of Hashem is one of total sublimation, total surrender. Ani Ledodi, I am giving myself over to my beloved with love. veDodi li. This is a theme that you find throughout the Passion, Pashas Reich, because when we do mitzvahs, we are not simply checking them off the list. We're doing them with our entire being. Nosoin titein, posoyach tiftach, hoshev teshivem. So we can do it in a perfunctory way. We can do a mitzvah and give out of a sense of obligation. But we don't give charity just out of a sense of obligation. The Pasuk says, thank you, Chesed le'umim chatos. Kindness to the nations of the world is chatos. How could that be? We have very philanthropic and altruistic Gentiles that give millions of dollars, billions of dollars to charity. What does that mean? But perhaps the Pasuk's telling us that in the nations of the world, it's tied to logic. Yes, the Bill Gates Foundation will give millions of dollars to inoculate children in Africa because they perceive and identify a need. And therefore, I'm coming to fulfill the need. It's chatos, doesn't just mean a sin. Chatos means a chisoron. Chesed le'umim is logical. Our service of Hashem transcends logic. It's how you define chesed, Hashem. It's overflowing. It's beyond the rational. It's v'hoiseh. It's much more than the die. It's much more than just the logical. And I think perhaps, to me at least, the final psukim, 2 psukim in Pashas Reich say it all. You know, when you're listening to a musical symphony and you listen to the last stanza, it incorporates everything that precedes it. It's like it leads to a crescendo and brings and weaves together all the preceding themes. And that last pasuk in Pashas Re'eh says it all. Hashem says to us, Shalosh pa'omim b'shana yero'eh kol zechurcha es pnei Hashem elikecha b'mokem asher tivcha. We're told that we come to Yerushalayim 3 times a year, and we have to bring with us a carbon oila, an oilas re'iyah, v'lo yera'u panai reikom. Don't see my face empty-handed. In fact, we don't just bring an oilas re'iyah, we bring a carbon chagiga v'chagoy semoyse chag l'Hashem. We have to bring shalmei simcha. There's a long laundry list that Hashem demands from us when we come up to Yerushalayim. And, you know, when we think about it, it's strange. I don't know, if I invite someone to my simcha, making a wedding, and you call up your uncle and say, you know, your rich uncle from Chicago, I'm very excited that you're coming to my wedding, but make sure you bring with that big check. Make sure you bring with that nice gift. Doesn't sound very appropriate, shall we say. I mean, here's this poor Yid who's slept his way from Beersheba in the south, from Dan in the north, further north, and he comes all the way to Yerushalayim. He couldn't even afford a donkey. He had to let go of his menial job, but he wants to do the Ratzon Hashem. He has a mitzvah of coming up to Yerushalayim, Alilu Regel, and he comes up, and he's scraping together his last money. He's sleeping on the ground on his way up. Can't afford to stay in an inn. And he comes to Yerushalayim, And he's finally there. And then he has to scrape together money to buy a carbon oiler and a shlomim. And come on, is that what does Hashem want from this poor guy? Strange. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us what's the ideal for our service of Hashem is instinctively, reflexively. What we want to do when we come to Yerushalayim is to come with a gift, to come with a magnificent gift, an oiler. It's a reflection of the internal stirrings of our hearts. And if we're able to do that, Hashem says, then I want so much to give to you, because it's a reflective relationship. Hashem tzilcha. And therefore, if you can be an ani ledodi, I'm able to do what I dearly want, veDodi li, and I can pour back to you bracha ad b'lidai. And that's our introduction to Elul. Parshas Reich gives us the introduction. Then we have, of course, the work of Elul, of Shoftim v'Shoitrim, and Kiseitze LaMelchama. We go out to war, and we have to take on those defects in our character, identify them, and work on them, and so on. And we have to be grateful, which is a very integral part of our Bittul Hayeshus. It's all about us being Mavatal, our yesh, our I, our ego. The Baal Shem Tov would say on the Pasuk, Anochi, Moshe Rabbeinu said, Anochi oimed bein Hashem u'beinechem, I stand between you and God, and I gave you the Torah. Anochi, it's the I that stands between us and Hashem. That's really the insulating material that doesn't allow the receptivity of life from its source, of my soul, to be able to infuse me with true life. And when there's an Ani Hashem Rofe'echa, when I can take my Ani and transform it into Hashem Rofe'echa, that is how I am healed and how I'm able to realize a new lease on life as Achrenu L'chaim, because I've embraced life. I have taken away the impediments, all the materials that interfere with that divine receptivity. And so, when we come to the conclusion of our journey through Elul, and we come to the cusp, we come to Rosh Hashanah, the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah, we read Atem Nitzavim, which really is already, we're at Rosh Hashanah. Hayoim, Atem Nitzavim, Hayoim, the Zohar HaKadosh tells us, is Hayoim Dedina, built on a pasuk which we're familiar with, that we're standing before Hashem, Kulchem, Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, and we read in Nitzavim how close we are to Hashem. The 3 times that the Psukim tell us about the love of Hashem and the overflowing of Mol Hashem Elokecha Lecha Es Levavcha Ve'es Levav Zaracha. That also is Rosh Tevis of Elul. That's the conclusion, the culmination of Elul. But we are in the middle of Elul, and we're in Parshas Kiseitze. And when we read Parshas Kiseitze LaMelchama, we're engaged in the throes of war. We're engaging those things that are pulling us down. And we read, it's very fascinating. When we read Kiseitze LaMelchama Alevecha, we read the story of the Yefas Toya. And we're talking here again about the Anshe HaMelchama, the people that went out to war, which we read in the last week's parasha. Great people. Chayoles Shel Beis David. People that had a hold and a grip on their Yetzer Hara, but we know when we go out to war, sometimes we would like to perhaps curl up like a pussycat at the fire. Ignorance is bliss. The less we know, the less we're responsible. But we understand that when we grow and we become closer to the Kisei HaKavod, Kol HaGodol Mechaveiro, Yitzroi Godol Hemenu, and we're upping the ante, so to speak. There are temptations and blandishments that lurk at every corner, and sometimes we succumb, sometimes we slip, and the Torah gives us a very sad trajectory that takes place. When we read the parasha, we read first the parasha of the Fastoya, and then we read the parasha when a man has two wives. One is Ahuva and one is Senua. It's almost as if the Torah is predicting what will transpire, as Rashi tells us. And then, B'yom hanchile esbonav lo yuchel levaka, what was ingrained and embedded inside the chip of our minds is integral to who we are. We can't shake it off. We've now confirmed our identity as the B'chor. The thing that we really have chosen was the Eshes Yefas Toya. She glistened, she glamored, she seduced, but it doesn't really reflect who we really are. But we're going down. And then there's a Ben Sora or Moira, as Rashi tells us. One thing leads to the other. And from the Ben Sora to Moira, we read the parasha of Kiyir Be'ish Chet Mishpat Moves. The Torah is really giving us a glimpse how Avera Gereris Avera. One thing leads to the other. And sometimes we look at ourselves in an honest, reflective moment. All of us, if we are honest with ourselves and we are Lev Yoidea Moras Nafshoy, we see that there are certain things we feel helpless, we can't control, very difficult. We're ingrained in certain habits and practices, things that we're so acclimated to, and we know it pulls us down, but it's very hard to recapture and get back into the groove and do what we know our neshama is calling us to do. But the next parasha gives us an entirely different spin. The next parasha tells us mitzvah, gereres mitzvah. It tells us an upward growth trajectory. It talks about first, ki yiret sireh sherachicha oiseo nidochem v'salamta mehem. We have a mitzvah, hashev tushivim la'achicha, give it back to your brother. And then the Torah tells us to preserve our identity, lo yeh kli gever, and then we get more mitzvahs. We get ki yikore kan siper lefanecha. And then we're going to have, Rashi says, if you do these mitzvahs, you're going to be able to do more mitzvahs. Kisivne bayis chodosh. And as the commentaries tell us, you're rejuvenating and renewing. This is the house, the housing of life, and it becomes rejuvenated, and we're able to make marka, we're able to make gzeres and seyogos, as the ramazim, as the mafarshim in the Torah tell us, and so on. And we have a harachta yomim, we get brachas, and then we have animals with which we're able to do mitzvahs of leisachrush sherbachamor. We have fields of leisizruch kilaim, and as Rashi tells us, mitzvah gereres mitzvah. Very beautiful. But we have to read between the lines. And the Torah is telling us here that sometimes we go down, 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 and we feel we hit the bottom of the barrel. We never hit the bottom of the barrel. There's always a road back. Always, always, always. Because there's no such thing in life that doesn't represent tikkun, an opportunity, and closeness. Everything has the power to be transformed to the good. But where? How? Where do I start? And the first thing that the Torah tells us after the Leisolin Nivlasi Aloetz, after the Kiyir Be'ish Chet Mishpat Moves, is the mitzvah of Hashev Teshivim La'achicha L'sucha L'Salem. I think about another Jew. I live in his zone. And instead of sinking in the quagmire of my mind, of self-pity, of hurt, and of victimhood, and of rationalizations, I step out and I think for another. And I care for another. And that gives me the ability to now tune in to the vibrations of my neshama and to start my upward climb. Slowly and surely, my ani Ledodi is realized through va'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha, and then I can make my ani into Hashem. It's very easy to be taken a comma, follow the rational and reflexive route of at least bearing a grudge and living in the swamp of hurt and negativity, pain, anger, and rationalizations, and looking for distractions to numb those things that pain us, but then we experience more pain and more estrangement. But the Torah says, no, follow the pathway of ani, taking my ani, and connecting to another neshama, because another neshama is Hashem. I want to share with you, Rabbi say, if I may, a thought that occurred. I was learning a Gemara last week, a very fascinating Gemara. In Be'ah Daf Chaf, you may be familiar with the sugya. The Gemara actually talks about the argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. There was a very big dispute between the two as to whether we can bring an oilas re'iyah on Yontif. Are we only allowed to bring a shalmei chagiga because the Torah sanctions directly v'chagois amoisei chag l'Hashem, or do we say lachem v'loy legvoya? Beis Shammai maintained you cannot bring an oilas re'iyah on Yontif; you have to bring it after Yontif or on Chol HaMoed. And Beis Hillel said you can. And Beis Hillel not only said you can, but he said you're allowed to be soymech on those animals. And Beis Shammai said you can't be soymech. We won't go into the details of the sugya, but let me share with you a story that the Gemara says. Tanu Rabbanan. Maisa behillel azokin, Hillel himself, who he maintained that you can bring an oila to the Beis Hamikdash on Yontif, and you can be soymech. He brought it to the Azara. Chavru alav Talmidei Shammai. He wasn't there with a group of his Talmidim. He was the ultimate symbol of humility. But there were in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Azara, apparently there was some rough Talmidim of Beis Shammai that clamored around him. Amruloi, and they said to Hillel, Mativa shel behemazu. What is this animal all about? What are you bringing over here? Huh? Are you bringing an oila? Amalehem, he said to them, Nekevahi. Shlomim is a nekeva, and oila is going to be a zacha. He said, no, it's a nekeva. Lezivche shlomim evisia. I brought it as a shlomim. Kishkish lehem biznava. He kind of touched the tail to show, you could check. He knew they weren't going to check. It's not appropriate. He knew. Kishkish lehem biznava. He sort of created this decoy that they should leave him alone, and they went off v'holchu lahem. And they left him. And it looked like Gavra Yadam Shal Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel. It looked like they had actually established the halacha that now you cannot bring an oila to the Beis Hamikdash. It looked like they triumphed, which is what they wanted. And Rashi says, it's strange. Beis Hillel should say a lie. He had an oila, and it's a zacha, and he's saying it's in a keva. And the words of Rashi are amazing. Rashi says, Mirov and v'sanuso shel Hillel hayom meshanem ipnei hashalom. Hillel changed the facts. Mirov and v'sanuso. Now we wonder, is that really a symbol of humility? After all, integrity, truth is the hallmark of what it means to be a Jew. Chaysomi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu emes midva sheket tirchak. I think we're all familiar with the concept that you can be meshane mipnei hashalom. And perhaps we're making a mistake. Meshane mipnei hashalom doesn't mean that because I'm afraid of confrontation, flight or fight, I'm worried I don't want to get into a sticky situation, so I can say a lie to avoid confrontation. Meshane mipnei hashalom means I'm meshane myself to assume the other person's narrative. So when I come home and my parent, my spouse, is accosting me or accusing me of something, and instantly all my defenses are pricked, and I want to give them a piece of my mind and tell them how warped their thinking is and how distorted what they're saying is. And you know what? If I would talk to you the way you're talking to me, would happen. So, I have what to say. And what the Torah wants from us, the ultimate shalom is that I sublimate, surrender myself, and assume the other person's narrative. I'm meshanin. I changed myself mipnei darkei shalom, for the sake of shalom. Come back to that concept in a moment, because the Gemara tells us and continues with the most incredible words. The Gemara tells us it looked like Beis Shammai had established the halacha like them, but v'hayu sham zaken echad. There was an elderly man there, mitalmidei Shammai hazaken, who was from the Talmidim of Shammai hazaken, uBava ben Buta Shemai. His name was Bava ben Buta. He knew the halachas like Beis Hillel. He was a Talmud of Beis Shammai. And powerful, you know what it's like when you're a Talmud? You're rooting for your team. And you can't see the other side. But he had the greatness of being able to know that the halacha, the practical application of halacha, belongs in the court of Beis Hillel. He brought all the best sheep of Yerushalayim to the Azara, and he made a cruise, he made an announcement. Anybody who wants to bring an oila and be soimech, they're welcome to do it. And on that day, Gavra Yadin Shabbos Hillel v'Kavru Halacha Shukamoisa. Nobody could in any way argue with Bava ben Buta. The halacha was established like Beis Hillel. Very fascinating. Bava ben Buta had a greatness. He had a greatness. There was such greatness to him. The Gemara tells us, very fascinating, that just as an aside, Bava ben Buta, the Mishnah in Krisus tells us, we're familiar, the Mishnah in Krisus tells us that Bava ben Buta would bring an Asham Tali b'chol yom. Every day he brought an Asham Tali. Strange. And the day after Yom Kippur, he wanted to bring an Asham Tali. He said, Hamoyin hazeh, this Beis HaMikdash, if only I could bring my Asham Tali. But they wouldn't let him. The Chachamim wouldn't let him day after Yom Kippur. It looks like tshuva doesn't work. They wouldn't let him. Chassam Sofer tells us in Drashos, in Tufkufay and Gimel, he says something very powerful in Pashas Kisavai. He says that Bava ben Buta wanted to bring an Asham Tali every day because he was the one, as we're familiar in the Gemara in Baba Basra, that enjoined Hordas to build and rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Hordas Harasha had destroyed all the great Talmidei Chachamim, and he felt bad after gouging out the eyes of Bava ben Buta. He saw the greatness of Bava ben Buta, and he said, what should I do to rectify what I did? And Bava ben Buta told him, you extinguish the light of the world, build the light of the world, and he built the most beautiful Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara says, how could he do that? God forbid, imagine if Hitler, Yimach Shemoy, would have asked after the Holocaust, how can he rectify? He realized he did something wrong. How could he rectify? We're going to give him a takana. We know the raging debate about reparations after the war. People of principle, people that understand the MS, how do you do that? But the Gemara says he loved the Beis HaMikdash so much. One of the pshatim in the Gemara is he knew there was no other way. That it needed so much money to reconstruct the Beis HaMikdash. There was no other way. And he was desperate to bring back the Kvod HaShechina, and he did it. But Libay Noikfa, he brought an Asham Tali every day. And so too here. Bava ben Buta saw that the Azara is empty. And he wanted so much on Yontef, it should be replete with karbonos. And therefore he wanted so much to establish the halachas like Beis Hillel. And he had the power of Shalom. The Gemara tells us in the Dorim Daf Samach Vav, very beautiful Gemara, beautiful Shalom Bayis Gemara. The Gemara tells us that there was a fellow that came up from Bavel and he landed in Eretz Yisrael. He made Aliyah and he married a woman from Eretz Yisrael, but they had communication problems. And whatever he said, she didn't understand. And he got very, very frustrated. And one time he said to her, bring me butzina, bring me some vegetables. And she thought it meant bring me 2 lamps, 2 lanterns. And he was so angry, he said, go and smash it above her on the door. She thought above her means on the head of Bava ben Buta, who was outside giving a shir. And she takes these 2 lamps and bangs them on the head of Bava ben Buta. And he looks up and he says, what are you doing? What's this about? She said, my husband told me to do it. And the Gemara says, he said to her, amazing words. He said, you follow the will of your husband so dutifully, with such simplicity of faith, Hashem should give you 2 children like Bava, like me. Amazing. That means, someone hits me, someone assaults me, instantly I need to assert myself. I need to defend myself. But Bava ben Buta knew the secret of what it means to bring back the Shechina to Klal Yisrael. It means transcending rhyme, reason, logic, even if it means a self-indictment and bringing an Osham Toli B'chol Yom. Even if it means abandoning his beloved Rebbe Beis Shammai and putting himself in the mindset of Beis Hillel. Bava ben Buta maybe learned that from Hillel himself. But that's the pathway of Shalom, of building a Mishkan, of building a Beis HaMikdash. La'olam, we can be Meshane mipnei HaShalom, because when we're changing ourselves to adopt someone else's narrative, that's the ultimate connectivity that we are creating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to bringing the Shechina down to this world. That's the journey that we all have. I remember, we have a few more minutes to marry. Oh, 15, very good, okay. I was a Talmud of the Nesivos Shalom, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, and I once came to Yerushalayim. I used to go to visit him for Shabbos, and I used to go to the Kosel on Motzei Shabbos. There's a special aura, I used to wait. I didn't go right away when I arrived. I figured after Shabbos, you're in the zone, so to speak, and it's so beautiful. And I remember going over to him after Mariv. I waited till everybody went by and said, a good tavach, Shavua Tov. And then I went over to him and I said to him, Rebbe, I said, I'm about to go to the hotel. I haven't been for a long time. And I want to have this, I don't remember how I phrased it, but I want to have, Liris v'leirois, I want to feel the Shechina, feel close. And I remember him looking at me with such disdain. He said, that's why you go to the Kosel, to feel close. You go to the Kosel to serve Hashem, to implant emunah. You ponder, you reflect what took place at this spot. You live the Chalom of Yaakov. You live the Lirois v'leirois, the Koil Hamoin Choygeg, Klal Yisrael coming up to the Beis HaMikdash. And we ask, V'hashev Shechinase L'tzia in Ircha, it should come back. If you feel, you feel. We live in a generation where everything is so dependent on if I feel. The only barometer, the litmus test that we have is whether something is real is if we feel. But feeling is really a delusion. The real connectivity is built on trust, on faith, on doing it right. I don't feel anything when I am learning, exploring, and validating someone else's narrative that's the total opposite of mine. When I'm meshana myself. But that's the force of true connectivity. That's what brings shalom. I had a very close friend in Monsey who was a Rav, a prominent Rav. I could say his name is Rabbi Foyer, very special author of Sfarim. And he shared with me in, I think it was 2006 or 2007, he made his way to Yerushalayim, he made Aliyah. And he was going to be the Rav in a particular shul that was forming together. And he was looking forward to, he's a prolific writer, beautiful writer. He was looking forward to writing Sfarim and our scroll books. And when he came there, he sold his house over here. He put the money in the stock market. Meanwhile, so that you should be able to buy an apartment over there. And just at that time, there was a crash in the market. And when he arrived in Yerushalayim, he did not have the money to buy an apartment. And the shul that he was going to, sort of the whole thing fell apart. And when I visited him, he had incredible back pain. He had such back pain that suddenly his back gave way, and he was an Ola Chadash. He didn't speak Ivrit. He didn't have, him and his wife were struggling with Kupat Cholem, how to, navigate the system over there. And it was terrible, terrible getting down the steps into a taxi, up the steps. And I visited him, and I said to him, Rabbi, it's so hard for me to see you in so much pain. And he said to me, I said to Hashem, I came, I made Aliyah. I did so much. I sold my house. I gave up such a beautiful Rabbanus. I want to do this for you. I wanted to write Sfarim. I was looking forward to being a Mabitz Torah. And here I'm dealing with so much pain. Hashem, I know you have a plan, but can you please just bring your plan a little closer to my plan? And then he said, I realized, what? What am I saying? I live in your world. You don't live in my world. And when I live in your world, you know what's good. You're tachlis hatoiv, oilum chesed yibana. And once I just absorbed that and went over it, things got easier. The pain became manageable. And life started to turn around. Life turns around when we embrace the ani Ledodi. I am Ledodi. veDodi li. We get so angry and we get so worked up. And it's all about me. There was a chassid that came to his Rebbe. And he came to the Rebbe, he said, Rebbe, I suffer from anger. I get so easily triggered. And when I get triggered, I can explode at my wife and my kids. And it's not pretty. And I really want to get a handle on this anger problem that I have. Do you have any tips? How can I deal with it? And the Rebbe said, I can help you, but you know what? I have someone in the waiting room that wants to come in, came from a long way away. Do you mind stepping out for a few minutes? And when he's done, you'll come back in. I'll have time for you. Okay. So he steps out. The waiting room, there's, refreshments there and coffee and tea and, and cake, cookies, makes himself at home. Meanwhile, this Yid comes in. He gives his kvittel to the Rebbe, and he, speaking there for a few minutes. And as the chassid is leaving the room, the Rebbe says to him at the door, when you go in the waiting room, you'll see that guy that just came out before you. He's sitting in the corner. Can you please make yourself a hot cup of coffee, engage him in conversation, and inadvertently spill the whole coffee over him? Just spill it all over him. Let's see what happens. Okay, the Rebbe says this is what he's going to do. And he goes out and he makes himself a nice cup of coffee, and he's sitting next to the guy. Oh, where are you coming from? From Vikim Dayid? Oh, from Lemberg. Oh. Again, he's getting a little conversation, and all of a sudden, everything spills all over him. Oi, I'm so sorry. No, it's okay. No, you're okay. And then the Rebbe calls him in, and the Rebbe said, what happened to your rekel? What happened to your jacket? So he says, I was in the waiting room and someone spilled coffee all over me. So he said, but I thought that you're a guy that gets angry. Why didn't you get angry? So he said with a smile, he said, Rebbe, he said, I heard the Rebbe telling him at the door. I heard the Rebbe's voice was a little loud. Spill the coffee over him. So he said, do you hear what you're saying? Do you hear what you're saying? Do you hear what you're saying? The Rebbeinu Shloim is the one who engineers everything. The Rebbeinu Shloim says everything should happen. Yeah, I said it loud. Because if you listen carefully, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying exactly what should happen, because everything in life is given to us as a springboard and an opportunity. It's coming from a loving Father in heaven. So even if it's coffee spilled all over me, it's an opportunity for me to regroup, to lift up, to rise above my natural reflexive reaction and get it right. Because my ani is Ledodi, I'm listening to the Kol Doidi Doifek all the time. And when there's that ani Ledodi, there's a veDodi li. And it's a veDodi li for eternity. Because Doidi li, Hashem wants to be so close to us, and we can experience it from the other side, v'ani loi. Let me close just with one little vignette that I heard recently. There was a Yid his name was Zalman Hoffman, And he was a chassid of Reb Aaron of Belz, Reb Aaron of Belz, who was a saintly person beyond our conception, so great, who survived miraculously the Holocaust and replanted the Belzer Hasidus in Yerushalayim. And this Yid, Zalman Hoffman, was a Heisbacher. He was close with the Belzer Rebbe. And as a Bacher, he was very oduk, very dovuk, very connected to him, bottled to him. And the war broke out, and unfortunately, Zalman lost his family, his close ones. He went through Shiva Medure Gehenim, from one camp to the other, one labor camp to the other. And at the conclusion of the war, he was in DP camps, but he wanted to go back to his Rebbe and see his Rebbe. And therefore, at the end of the war, after a couple of years, he had an opportunity to come to America. He said, no, I want to go to Israel. I must be with my Rebbe. I must be there. He made his way with great difficulty, overcame the blockade, and he came to the door of his Rebbe finally. And when he came to the door of his Rebbe, the Gabbai, Rav Shalom Fogel, announced to the Reb Aaron Lebelzi, he never looked down, he was always looked down. And he said, Rebbe, Zalman is due. Zalman is here. And the Rebbe looked up and he saw Zalman at the door. And he said, Man, Zalmana! My Zalman! Wow! He made it through! My Zalman! This Zalman Hoffman said, all the travails and all the challenges and all the pain just melted away. He came home to his father's arms. There was nothing that compared. It was so beautiful. Rabbi Say, there's a day when all of us, our neshamas, will be lifted aloft by the Malachi Hashoris that will accompany us up to heaven's door. And there at heaven's door, they'll announce, Naftali has arrived, Chaim has arrived, Yitzchak has arrived. And the greatest, deepest subliminal yearning that we all have is that when the curtain parts, Hashem will be able to look at us, ayin be'ayin yiru. He'll say, my Zalman, my Chaim, my Naftali, my Ronen. You are mine, you're mine, you're mine. And nothing, all our journey in life is to be able to realize that moment, reflect that moment. Ani Ledodi, we live a life of Ani Ledodi, veDodi li. It should be a gebench to your, a very productive and fruitful Elul, hachnosa into the new year. Bracha v'atzlacha to everybody. Aksiva v'chasim tova. Thank you, Rabbi Blas. Thank you. Thank you. No, I'm going to have 9. That's great.